Hello everybody, we are going to get some more practice with solving simultaneous equations where one or both of the equations are quadratics. Now I apologise in advance for how long this video is. I know most of my videos are under 10 minutes, but this is quite a tricky topic. So I thought that doing a slightly longer video will be a lot more helpful for you. So I'm going to try and go through all of these questions quite slowly. But before I do that, I encourage you to have a go yourself. So pause the video and have a go at solving these 6 questions. And for questions 5 and 6, you are able to use a calculator. That is me being kind to you. So with all simultaneous equations that involve quadratics, we use substitution. So I can see here that y is equal to 2x minus 1. So we can substitute this value for y into our second expression. So instead of writing y, I can write 2x minus 1. And then that is obviously equal to all of this business here. X squared minus 2x plus 2. Now we can solve this equation by getting everything on one side. So if we get rid of this 2x minus 1 from the left-hand side. So first of all, if we get rid of the 2x, so we subtract 2x from both sides. Then now we're just left with negative 1 is equal to x squared. Negative 2x minus another 2x is minus 4x, and then plus 2. And finally, we want to get rid of this negative 1, so if we add 1 to both sides, then we're now left with 0 on the left-hand side, and that is equal to x squared minus 4x plus 3. Now, I always like to get all of my x terms on the left hand side and put the 0 on the right hand side. So I'm just going to switch these two expressions around, and now we can go ahead and solve this equation. Now this expression on the left here factorizes. If you think about two numbers that multiply together to get 3 and add together to get negative 4, well, those two numbers are going to be negative 3 and negative 1. We multiply these together, we get positive 3. If we add them together, we get negative 4. So we can factorize this expression. So this now becomes x minus 3 in one bracket, and then x minus 1 in our other bracket, and that is equal to 0. So either x minus 3 is equal to 0, or x minus 1 is equal to 0. So if we go ahead and solve these two equations, we're left with x is equal to 3, or x is equal to 1. Now we can substitute these back into our linear equation. So to work out the corresponding values for y, well, when x equals 3, we're going to have 2 times 3 minus 1. Well, 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. And now when x equals 1, we're going to have 2 times 1, which is 2. And then minus 1, that gives us 1. So for this question, our two solutions are x equals 3 and y equals 5, or x equals 1 and y equals 1. Okay, question 2. Now here I can see that we've got two expressions that are equal to y. So it doesn't matter which one we substitute into the other. Let's substitute this expression for y into our top equation. Okay, so instead of writing y, I can write 3x squared minus x minus 2. And now that is equal to everything on the right hand side. So minus x squared plus 5x plus 2. Now we want to get everything on one side, so we just want to be left with 0. So because we've got more x squared terms on the left, I'm going to put everything on the left hand side. So the first thing I'm going to do is to get rid of this negative x squared. So if I add x squared to this side, I obviously need to add x squared to this side as well. So what's we left with? Well, we've got 4x squared now, minus x minus 2. And on the right hand side, these two terms cancel, so we're just left with 5x plus 2. And now let's get rid of this 5x from both sides. So on the left hand side we've got 4x squared. Negative x minus another 5x is minus 6x. And then we've got minus 2, and then that just equals 2. And finally, if we want to get rid of this 2, we can subtract 2 from both sides. So we are now left with 4x squared minus 6x, and now we've got minus 4, and that equals 0. So we could go ahead and solve this, but I can see that we can simplify this because each term is divisible by 2. So let's just divide everything by 2, and then we will be left with 2x squared minus 3x minus 2 equals 0. Okay, now we can go ahead and solve this equation. Now there are a few ways we could solve it. We could use the quadratic formula, but just to give you some more practice with factorising, let's solve this by factorising. And the method we're going to use is to split the middle term. Now, if you're a bit unfamiliar with factorising these types of quadratics, I do have a video dedicated to this particular topic. So I encourage you to definitely go ahead and go through that video. I will put a link in the video description for that particular video. So what we need to think about is we need to think about two numbers. They have to multiply together to get the product of these two numbers. So let's just write this down. They need to multiply to get the product of 2 and negative 2, which is negative 4. And they also have to add to get this number. So they have to add to get negative 3. So what two numbers multiply together to get negative 4 and add together to get negative 3? Well, if we think about it, one has to be negative because the product is negative. So the numbers I'm thinking of are negative 4 and positive 1. So let's just write that down here. So negative 4 and positive 1. So negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, and negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. So what we can do is I'm just going to rewrite this equation, but instead of writing negative 3x, I'm going to split that up into negative 4x and positive 1x. Okay, so let's just rewrite this. We've got 2x squared and then minus 4x plus 1x, and then we've got minus 2 equals 0. So let me just clarify what I've done there. So this term here, negative 3x, I've just split that up into negative 4x and positive x. Okay, these two terms, these two equations are exactly the same. Okay, now the reason I've done this is because now if I focus on, let's focus on the first part of my expression, so just this part, I can actually factorise this part of my expression. So I can factor out a 2x from both terms. So I can factor out a 2x from both terms. Inside my brackets, I'm just going to be left with x minus 2. So 2x times x is 2x squared, and 2x times negative 2 is negative 4x. And now if I focus on, let's do this in a different colour, let's focus on this part of my expression. Well, all I can factor out is a 1. These two terms don't have any common factors, so all I can factor out is a 1, and inside my brackets I'm just going to be left with x minus 2. So 1 times x is x, 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And obviously that all equals 0. And I know I've done that correct because I've got x minus 2 here and x minus 2. So now I can factor out an x minus 2 from both terms. So I can factor out an x minus 2, and all I'm left with in my other bracket is 2x plus 1. 2x plus 1. And then that equals 0. So I have two solutions. Either x minus 2 will equal 0, 3 to 1 action, or our other solution is going to be when 2x plus 1 equals 0. So if we go ahead and solve these equations, this one here, I can see that x is going to equal 2. With this equation, well, first we need to subtract 1 from both sides. So we're left with 2x is equal to negative 1. And now if we divide both sides by 2, we get x is equal to negative 1/2. So we have our solutions for x. Now the last step is to substitute both of these solutions into one of our equations. And I'm going to choose the bottom equation. So if you think about the bottom equation, well, our value for y, let's write this down over here, y is going to equal 3 times x squared. Well, x is 2, so it's going to be 3 times 2 squared, and then minus x, so minus 2, and then minus another 2. So what is our value for y? Well, 2 squared is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And then 12 minus 2 is 10. If we take away another 2, we now have 8. So we have our solutions for one of the pairs. Now let's look at the other pair of solutions. What happens when x is equal to negative a half? Well, y is going to equal, let's use the same equation. So it's going to be 3 times x squared. So that's negative 1/2 squared. And then subtract x. So we're going to subtract negative a half, and then subtract 2. So what do we have now? Well, negative a half squared, that's going to be positive 1/4. And if we times that by 3, well, that's 3/4. So we've got 3/4. And then if we're subtracting negative a half, that's the same as adding a half. And then subtract 2. Now, just to make things simple, if I just change a half, so that is has a denominator of 4. So if we find an equivalent fraction, so a half is the same as 2/4. So let's just change a half to 2/4, just so we're working with quarters. 2/4. And if we do the same for 2, 2 is the same as 8/4. So if I just get rid of the 2 and change that to 8/4. So remember, we're not using a calculator for this. So let's work out what this is. 3/4 plus 2/4, that's 5/4. And then if we take away 8/4, we now have negative 3/4. So that is our answer. So our solutions for this question are x equals 2 and y equals 8, or x equals negative a half and y equals negative 3/4. Okay, we're on question 3 now. So I can see that we've got y is equal to this expression here. So I can see straight away that I can now substitute this expression for y into this equation. So we're going to have 2x, so 2x minus y. Now we're going to subtract this whole equation. So I'm going to put it in brackets. We're going to subtract x squared plus x minus 2. And then we've got plus 4. And that is equal to 0. So this is where you need to be really careful when we're subtracting this whole expression. So we've got 2x. Now if we're subtracting x squared, that's minus x squared. Now we're subtracting x. And now we're subtracting negative 2. Well, that is the same as adding 2. Okay. And now we've got plus 4 equals 0. So now we can simplify things. So 2x minus x, well, that's just x. So we've got x minus x squared. And then we can also simplify this part. So 2 plus 4 is 6. So plus 6, and that equals 0. So let's just get it in the right order. So I'm going to put the x squared terms first. So it's going to be negative x squared plus x, and then plus 6, and that equals 0. Now, I could solve it like this, but it's going to be much easier if I've just got x squared. So what I can do is I can multiply every term by negative 1. So let me just actually write that down just to show you what I'm doing. I'm going to multiply each term by negative 1. That's absolutely fine. As long as I do it to the left and the right, that's absolutely fine. So if I multiply this term by negative 1, well, I'm just left with x squared. If I multiply this term by negative 1, that's minus x. This is going to be minus 6. And on the right hand side, well, 0 times negative 1 is still 0. So now we've got a much nicer equation that we can solve. And I can see that this equation does factorise quite nicely. So two numbers that multiply together to get negative 6 and add together to get negative 1, well, that is going to be negative 3 and positive 2. So I can factorise this as x minus 3 times x plus 2, and then that equals 0. And you can again expand the brackets, and just to check, you should be left with this. So again, we have two solutions. Either x minus 3 is going to equal 0, or, well, our second solution is going to be x plus 2 equals 0. So we can now go ahead and solve these two equations. Well, over here we've got x is going to equal 3, and over here x is going to equal negative 2. So now we can substitute these values back in. Let's choose our bottom equation. So what is our values for y? So when x equals 3, well, we're going to have 3 squared plus 3 minus 2. So 3 squared is 9, 9 plus 3 is 12, and 12 minus 2 is 10. So that's one solution. Our other solution is going to be when x equals negative 2. So we've got negative 2 squared, and then plus negative 2, and then subtract 2. Okay, so negative 2 squared, that is positive 4, and then we're going to be taking away 2, well that's 2, and if we take away another 2, well we're left with 0. So our value for y for this one is 0. So just to clarify our solutions, we have x equals 3 and y equals 10, or x equals negative 2 and y equals 0. Okay, question 4. Now it looks like we're going to have to substitute this equation into this one, but at the moment we don't have y as the subject. So if we just rearrange this top equation to make y the subject, so we can get rid of this 5x by subtracting 5x from both sides. So we'll be left with y is equal to 5 minus 5x. And now we have an expression for y. We can substitute this into our quadratic equation. So if we rewrite our quadratic equation, we've got 2x squared minus 9x, and then we're going to subtract y. So we're going to subtract this whole expression. So if I write it in brackets again, we're going to subtract 5 minus 5x, and then that equals 11. So first of all, let's just deal with the brackets here. So we've got 2x squared minus 9x. So we're subtracting 5, and we're also subtracting negative 5x, which is going to be positive 5x, and that equals 11. So now we can collect like terms. If we add together the x terms, we're going to be left with 2x squared. Negative 9x add 5x is negative 4x. And then we've got minus 5 equals 11. And now we want 0 on this side. So if we subtract 11 from both sides, we now have 2x squared minus 4x. Negative 5 subtract 11 is negative 16. And that equals 0. And just like before, we can simplify this. Everything is divisible by 2. So if we divide everything by 2, we now get x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Now, I think we can factorise this expression. So when we're solving this quadratic, first of all, let's factorise this. So what we're looking for are two numbers that multiply together to get negative 8 and add together to get negative 2. And I believe, if I'm correct, that we're going to have positive 2, so positive 2 and negative 4. Let's just double check that. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, and negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. So yes, that does work. And then on the right hand side, we've just got 0. So again, we're going to have two solutions. Either x plus 2 is going to equal 0, or our other solution is going to be when x minus 4 is equal to 0. So if we just solve these two equations, we're going to have x is equal to negative 2, or x is going to equal 4. Now let's find our values for y. I think I'm going to use the top equation this time because we don't have any quadratics. So the top equation, we've got 5 times x. Well, in this case, x is negative 2. And then plus y, and that has to equal 5. So 5 times negative 2, well that's negative 10. Negative 10 plus y is equal to 5. So now if we add 10 to both sides, we get y is equal to 15. That's one of our solutions. The other one is when x equals 4. So we're going to have 5 times 4 plus y is equal to 5. Well, 5 times 4 is 20. So 20 plus y equals 5. And now if we subtract 20 from both sides, we get y is equal to negative 15. So our two solutions are x equals negative 2 and y equals 15, or x equals 4 and y equals negative 15. So now we're on to question 5, and this asterisk means this is a calculator question. So this time I'm going to make y the subject. So if I think about the top equation, if I rearrange this equation to make y the subject, I can subtract 2x from both sides. So we're left with y is equal to 7 minus 2x. So now we have our expression for y. Let's substitute this in to this equation. So if you focus on the second equation, we have x squared take away y squared. Well, y is 7 minus 2x. So it's going to be 7 minus 2x, and all of that is being squared. Again, make sure you put it in brackets, and then that equals 8. So we're going to have to expand the brackets now. So we've got x squared, and then we're going to subtract all of this squared. Now I'm going to put big brackets in because I'm going to also include another set of brackets. So we've got 7 minus 2x times 7 minus 2x. So the reason I'm doing it like this is just so I don't make any mistakes, okay, and just so I can show you every step that I'm taking. And then all of that is equal to 8, because a lot of people do make a mistake with 7 minus 2x squared. They will just square both terms. So a lot of students I see will do 7 squared and then just negative 2x squared, okay, which is not correct. Okay, so we have x squared subtract. Now let's expand these brackets. So 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times negative 2x is negative 14x. Negative 2x times 7 is another negative 14x. And then negative 2x times negative 2x is positive 4x squared. Those are brackets, and then that equals 8. Okay, now remember, we are subtracting this whole thing. So we need to make sure we distribute the negatives correctly. So we've got x squared. Now we're going to have minus 49. We're going to subtract negative 14x. That's the same as adding 14x. We're going to add another 14x. We're going to subtract 4x squared. And then that equals 8. So although I have included an extra step or two, I just want to make sure that my signs are correct. Okay, now we can simplify. So x squared subtract 4x squared, well, that's negative 3x squared. We can collect the x terms as well. So 14x plus 14x is plus 28x. And then we've got minus 49 equals 8. And now we want 0 on this side, so if we subtract 8 from both sides, we've now got negative 3x squared plus 28x. Negative 49 subtract 8 will be negative 57, and that equals 0. And now we're going to solve this equation. Now this time it looks a bit trickier, so I'm going to use the quadratic formula. Okay, so if we just remind ourselves what the formula is. So to solve any quadratic equation, we can use the formula x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and all of that over 2a. So this is our formula. Let's just write down what our values for a, b and c are. So a, well, that's the coefficient on the x squared term, which is negative 3. B is the coefficient on the x term, which is positive 28. And c is the coefficient, or well, just the constant term, which is negative 57. So let's plug these in to our formula. Let's go up here. So we've got, so let's just write this down. X is going to be equal to minus b, so that's minus 28, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 28 squared, and I can see now why we get to use the calculator. And we're going to subtract 4 times a, well, a is negative 3, times c, well, c is negative 57. And let's just extend our root symbol. And then all of that is being divided by 2a. So, well, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. So I can just write negative 6 there. So this is where we get the calculator out. So I've typed all of this into the calculator, and I've chosen to start with the plus first. So one of our solutions is going to be x equals 3. It does work out quite nicely, this one. And now I'm just going to change the plus to a minus. And my other solution, so or x is going to equal 19 over 3. So not quite as nice, but we have two answers for x. And now we're going to substitute both of these into one of our equations, and I think we're going to choose the top equation because it looks a bit easier. So when x equals 3, we've got 2 times 3 plus y equals 7. So 2 times 3 is 6. So 6 plus y equals 7. So if we subtract 6 from both sides, we get y is equal to 1. And now with our other solution, when x equals 19 over 3, we're going to have 2 times 19 over 3 plus y equals 7. So 2 times 19 over 3, well, that's going to be 38 over 3 plus y is equal to 7. So to get y on its own, we just need to subtract this fraction. So we're going to have y is equal to 7 minus 38 over 3. And although this is a calculator, I think I can just do this without a calculator. So let's just convert 7 into a fraction that has a denominator of 3. So 7 is the same as 21 over 3. So it's 21 over 3 minus 38 over 3. So what's 21 minus 38? Well, that will give us minus 17. So that's minus 17 over 3. So I've just written down our two solutions here. We have x equals 3 and y equals 1, or x equals 19 over 3 and y equals negative 17 over 3. You could also write these fractions as decimals. Either one would be fine. Okay, so we've approached the last question now, which I'm sure you'll all be relieved at if you have made it this far. Okay, so we can see that y is equal to x minus 2. So again, let's substitute this value for y into our second equation. So our second equation, we have 2x squared minus x times y. So y, we obviously know, is x minus 2. So we're going to multiply that by x minus 2. And that equals 11. So if we simplify this by expanding the brackets, we get 2x squared. Now, minus x times x, well, that's negative x squared. And then negative x times negative 2 is positive 2x. And that equals 11. So we can simplify this. 2x squared minus x squared, well, that's just x squared. So we've got x squared plus 2x equals 11. And now if we subtract 11 from both sides, we get x squared plus 2x minus 11 is equal to 0. Now I can see that this definitely does not factor. So we are going to have to use the quadratic formula. Well, we don't have to. We could complete the square. And actually, why don't we complete the square just as something a bit different, just so you've got a bit of practice on everything. So I'm going to complete the square on this equation. So you might have been taught different methods, but again, I do have a video dedicated to this topic, so please feel free to go ahead and watch that. So we have x squared plus 2x. Now I'm just going to leave a space, and then I'm going to write my 11 minus 11 equals 0. And the whole reason I'm leaving a space here is because I'm going to write in a number that will allow me to complete the square. So what number do we choose? Well, what we do is we half the coefficient in front of our x term, and then we square it. So half of 2 is 1, and 1 squared is still 1. So we're going to add on 1, and now that will allow me to complete the square. But remember, I cannot just add on 1 willy-nilly. For whatever I do to the left-hand side, I have to do the same to the right-hand side. So because I'm adding on 1 over here, I also have to add on 1 over here. I need to keep my equation balanced. And now the whole reason of adding on 1 is because if I focus on this part of my equation here, this does now factorize. Okay, this factorizes to x plus 1, all of that squared. Okay, and again, you could think about two numbers that multiply together to get 1 and add together to get 2. Well, those two numbers would be 1 and 1. So it would be x plus 1 times x plus 1, or we could just write x plus 1 squared. So we have x plus 1, all of that squared, and then we've got minus 11. And on the right hand side, 0 plus 1, well, that is just 1. So now what do we do? Well, we want to solve for x. So the first thing to do is to get rid of this negative 11. So if we add 11 to both sides, we get x plus 1, all of that squared, and then that equals, well, 1 plus 11 is 12. Okay, Now we want to get rid of this squaring, so we're undoing everything. So if we square root both sides, now we get x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 12. And remember, you have to include the plus and minus. There's two solutions. And now I'm just going to bring this up here, I'm running out of room. So we want to get x on its own, so we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. So x is going to be equal to -1 plus or minus the square root of 12. So we have two solutions. Now, to work out our two solutions, we do now need a calculator. So one of our solutions is going to be -1 plus root 12, and the other one's going to be -1 minus root 12. So after putting this into a calculator, we get x is equal to 2.464. I'm just rounding that to 3 decimal places. Or, remember, we've got two solutions. So I'm just going to replace the positive symbol with a negative symbol. So we're going to subtract root 12, and we get x is equal to -4.464. And again, I've rounded that to 3 decimal places. So now we have our values for x. Let's work out our value for y. So again, we're going to substitute into the linear equation. So y is going to be equal to, so we're just going to use this value for x. So 2.464 minus 2, which equals 0.464. That's quite easy. And then our other value, so we're going to substitute this value in now. So it's going to be -4.464 minus 2, and that will give us -6.464. So we now have our two solutions, and notice how I've given my answers both to 3 decimal places. So we've now come to the end of this particular video, and I've done a lot of work on solving equations using written methods. However, we can also solve simultaneous equations using graphs. So that's what we're going to look at in the next video. So thank you for watching, and thank you for putting up with me for this length of time, if you have. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care.